Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning, Clay.
Good morning. Morgan Ortegas is with us today. I'm Clay Aiken. Welcome to Bold. Carrie is out for the week, and I'm really pumped. I've never had a guest host before.
This is going to be the best day of your life.
It probably will be. It
Just
already
be
has
prepared.
felt that way. Morgan, obviously, we know as one of the hosts of Bold Business on
Every Tuesday
mornings at 9. So you're familiar with her, and you've been on this show so many times, and you're my favorite anyway. So we're set.
But normally I'm talking about some like dorky foreign policy or like arcane tax policy thing. So now today we get to have fun.
We do get to have fun, but we got to start with a little bit of foreign/tax/business policy.
That's good.
Because Davos is happening this week. President Trump went to Davos. And I'm sorry, you have to explain it to me.
I actually think that it was a brilliant move because he is sort of this whole scene, anti-globalist, and he had a chance to go. And I was watching the videos before we came in, watching him go up the stairs, and the whole of Davos, politicians, media. The room was almost, in the clip that I saw, the room was almost silent just watching him and the entourage go up. I mean, you worked with him, it's the Trump show, and he brought the Trump show to Davos.
I think it's so cute that you thought that that's what I meant. I meant, what the hell is Davos?
Oh.
I don't even know what it is. You have to explain to me
You
what.
don't know what Davos is?
Well, it's a city in Switzerland. They ski a lot, but it's this big business convention that's not overtly political necessarily, right?
No.
It's a bunch of one percenters, yeah?
But that's a fair way of describing it. I mean, I think major companies go there and spend a lot of money to network with other companies. I think, they try to talk about conscious capitalism and where the world is going and how they can create an impact. So I do think that they bring entrepreneurs and try to make it more than just a 1% fest. But I think there's probably a lot of wine sipping on the slopes.
But there's a lot of discussion about trade and how a global economy is important, right? And so that's the issue because Donald Trump, interestingly enough, much like Bernie Sanders, sort of campaigned on this. We won't call it isolationism, but he definitely campaigned on America First policies. How has he been able to reconcile that with being the first president in 20-some years to actually go to this?
Which is fascinating, right? Because he's taking as much as there. So in his speech, he said that America first does not mean America alone. But if you think about all of the CEOs and the business people that were at Davos listening to that speech, all of their companies are going to be dramatically affected by the trade policies that he pursued, right? Especially whatever happens this year, probably have some sort of resolution on NAFTA renegotiation that will happen this year. That affects every company in the room. The trade deal that the U.S. has with Korea that's also being negotiated is not on as big a level as NAFTA, but you're seeing the Chinese take over from the TPP, right? They have their new Chinese version of that. So these sort of things, when we talk about, in my work, I talk a lot about geopolitical risk and how it affects business. So these, Brexit, Trump's election, these major geopolitical movements around the world really affect the day-to-day decision-making of these CEOs as they think about their strategy.
I think people, even I understand that. I'm more in the Bernie sort of camp as far as trade and whatnot goes. But there have been people who kind of have said that, and I'm gonna let you off the hot seat in a second. But there have been people who have argued, maybe tongue in cheek, maybe cynically, that the president didn't necessarily go for the policy and the important economic ramifications of him attending, but more because he wanted to be accepted into this world that perhaps he hasn't been respected in as a businessman in the past. Has he been accepted there?
I think, like any good politician, he was looking at the opportunity for Davos as a huge media opportunity. I think the world was shocked that he chose to go there because it's so anti everything that he stood for. I think that he thought, I'm going to bring my message to these people and try to sell it. But more than anything, and this makes him a good politician, I think that he said this is a massive media opportunity. This is like season 3, episode 2 of The Trump Show.
He's pretty good at that.
He's a genius at it.
Anything else happening this week in the news? of importance to you? Like, what do you think the biggest story is?
The immigration debates are really important. The administration is supposed to talk about infrastructure, which I think can be after sort of divisive immigration debates. If the administration pivots to talk about infrastructure and how we can have public-private partnerships, I think that that's something that Democrats and Republicans can agree on.
Before we handle the immigration issue, you think?
Well, sometimes you just have to walk and chew gum. We might have to do both at once. We've got a March 5th deadline on DACA. Here's what we should be watching. He's got the State of the Union coming up next Tuesday, and we'll see what he says on China, right? Because there's rumors that he's going to be instituting a tariff on potentially on steel and aluminum. These are all rumors that are out here. Nothing the administration's confirmed, but that sort of action, imminent action on steel and aluminum, tough talk on China, all this stuff affects business.
A lot to get in, Morgan,
We're
with
being
3
meaty
weeks
this
with
morning.
3 weeks before the potential shutdown again of the country, because we got to get this immigration thing handled.
We gotta get more women elected.
We got to get Congressman Will Hurd on
Yes.
a little bit later, who can talk to us a little bit about bipartisanship when it comes to immigration. He's a congressman who you know pretty well.
I do. He's fantastic. I think he's the future of the Republican Party.
But first we got, and you know what, they gave it, Carrie always has her computer here, and she's not here. We talked to our producers through this. The producer gave us her computer today. It has locked up. We don't know her password. I have absolutely no idea what's going on. So we'll find out if we do know that Diamond and Silk are with us now. Diamond and Silk, they don't even need last names, I don't think. Diamond and Silk, are you with us? Oh, we see you. We can't hear you. I'm not exactly sure whether or not we have audio. We are. You know what? Carrie Sheffield is the glue that holds this place together.
I can tell. Carrie, I'm sorry. Clay and I are just going to take over the show and start talking about whatever we want.
We'll get them back on here in a second. Diamond and Silk are, as
They are
I think
so
most
funny.
people know,
So funny.
they are famous to many. Infamous to some, famous to many. They are very funny. There's 2 women from my home state, North Carolina. I'll definitely be asking them some stuff about that in a second. About who are avid Trump supporters.
Yeah.
And were some of the first people to.
Yes, we can hear you loud and
There
clear.
they are. There they are. Diamond and Silk,
Hi,
welcome.
ladies.
Hi, John, and thank you for having us.
Yeah, my husband loves you guys. You probably won't remember this, but we were at the White House on the July 4th party that night, and we stopped you guys, and my husband doesn't take selfies with anybody. I take selfies with everybody, and he was like, I've got to have a picture with Diamond and Silk.
Oh, wonderful.
So wait, so you guys were at the White House, is that right?
Yes.
So
Oh,
you're-
yes,
been at the White
definitely.
House.
Yeah.
This is a
let us
changed life for you in the past 2 years. What made you start doing these videos? What made you? I mean, your first few videos really went viral. You got the attention of the the Trump campaign, and of course still the administration. Why did you feel it was important for you to start vlogging, so to speak, about Donald Trump and his candidacy?
Well, first of all, our video started back in 2014, December of 2014, just talking about things that we saw that, may have given us pause. 2015 come along, the president, Donald Trump announced he's running for president. I'm watching it on TV. I called my sister. I said, girl, cut on your TV. Donald Trump is announcing he's running for
And
president.
I saw what I was doing, and I turned on my TV.
And then she called me back halfway through. She said, girl, this is going to be the next president of the United States. And we didn't think anything else of it. But we noticed how the media started throwing him under the bus, calling him out of his name. And we didn't like that. So we stood up against that. We said, hey, don't attack him. Give him a chance like you give everybody else a chance.
That's right.
We saw how the media was trying to run the show, was trying to create the narrative, was trying to spoon feed us a narrative, and we didn't like it. We spoke out about it.
That's
and
right.
we didn't know those 10 people was going to turn into all of these millions of people
That's
hearing
right.
us.
It's amazing, and we often see you on Fox News as well, so y'all are real celebrities. So I think I already know the answer to this question, but the president's a year in office. How do you think he's doing? He just dealt with a 3-day shutdown. We've got another potential shutdown looming in 3 weeks. How do you think the president's doing?
A+++.
Yes, he's doing phenomenal. Just look at the economy.
He's doing more than good. He's doing excellent.
That's right.
When we look at the economic growth, entrepreneur opportunity, jobs being brought back, Black unemployment is the lowest that we've ever seen it. Black
That's
home
right.
ownership is up. We absolutely love it. This is what we voted for. This is why we voted the businessman in
That's
instead
right.
of a career politician.
That's right. And President Trump has done more in 1 year than President Obama did in 8 years.
So we love it.
A lot of folks who are supportive of the president still would argue that there are certain things that he continues to do that they wish he wouldn't do. His tweeting can be incredibly controversial. A lot of times he will say things that aren't not just not politically correct, but I think a lot of people would argue somewhat offensive. His issues in Charlottesville last summer. Are there things, and these are things that I think even Republicans and Trump supporters have criticized the president for. You guys have sort of made your name by being somewhat controversial yourselves. Are those things that concern you, his tweeting, some of the things that he said, and if they're not, are there things that he's doing that you wish he would change?
First of all, we didn't elect a priest or a pastor. We elected a president.
That's right.
Second of all, I love it when he tweet, when he Facebook, because we need to know what's going on. You have the left-wing media who wants to change the narrative, run the narrative, and want us to bite that so that they can distract us to what's really going on. And that's why he needs to continue to tweet so we would know the truth about certain things, because the media is not going to do that. The media, what they're going to do, especially the left-wing media, they're going to cover it up and make it look like it's sugar when we know it's not. It's sugar honey iced tea is what it is.
That's right. And another thing, we're not controversial. What we are is outspoken. We believe in opening up our mouths and speaking our truth instead of letting somebody tell us how to think and what we should be thinking. We believe in being outspoken and saying what we want to say and not being stagnated.
Well, woe be it unto me or anyone else to not let you two have your opinion. You got to speak your mind. But we were looking at some polling earlier that I found really interesting. I didn't know this. So over the past year, the president's approval rating has actually gone up with black men, which I thought was interesting. It's not something that I would have expected, but it still has remained pretty significantly low, his approval rating with black women. How do you think the president can improve those numbers? How can he reach out to more women, especially more women of color?
Well, I think his numbers have improved because now keep in mind now, this is the same polling that told us that Hillary Clinton was up in the polls and she was due to win, and those polls made her lose. I mean, she didn't even win it.
That's right.
Okay, so the deal is that I think he's doing a phenomenal job with everybody, whether they're black, white, Hispanic, Asian. He's bringing back economic opportunity and growth.
That's right.
He's putting more money in your pocket. I think that's what people want.
And also, when black women see their black men working, it's going to make black women very happy.
That's right.
That's right.
Well, I mean, certainly if that were the case, I would agree that they would be happy, but you can't deny that the African-American population in the country does tend to favor Democratic candidates.
They do,
very strong. And you two were registered Democrats before, am I not?
Yes, we were.
That's right.
So why is it that you feel like Democrats tend to attract Democrat candidates tend to attract African-American voters? What is it that you think makes African-American voters favor Democratic candidates, and why did you guys feel the need to switch not just to a different candidate, but to a completely different party? Do you feel the entire Democratic Party is not something you agree with, or is it just Donald Trump? Is he specifically an anomaly for you?
Okay, so let's go back. First of all, black people are conditioned to vote Democrat because those same Democrats was the ones that put the Jim Crow laws back into place in the 50s and the 60s.
Right.
So that scared black people. Black people felt like if I don't vote Democrat, I won't be able to eat. That was the problem.
They're conditioned.
That's a condition.
We
were conditioned to vote Democrat no matter who was on a ticket. This time we decided to vote for who was going to do the job.
Right.
We wanted somebody to secure the border because people crossing our border illegally, that hurts black people. That hurts black men. That hurts black women.
And Americans.
And Americans.
Yes.
We wanted somebody that was going to make sure that they wasn't outsourcing our jobs. Why would you take our jobs and outsource them to leave the American people riding dirty? That's right. And you know who's the one that's always hurt by that? Minority.
That's right.
So that's why we looked at the businessman. So we said, you know what? We're not going to vote based on party. We're going to vote based on who is going to do the job.
That was my question. Well, that was sort of my question. You have voted Democratic in the past, and you have chosen to support Donald Trump, not because of the party necessarily, but because of his policy positions, et cetera. Are there Democrats today? You're from North Carolina, right? Are you in Fayetteville? Is that right?
Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Okay. So, first of all, did you vote for me? Because I would have been on your ballot in 2014 as a Democrat. And second of all, are there Democrats who you do still support?
No, not really. Okay, okay. With the Democrats, I don't like their policies.
Right.
What they have done to black people, they use black people, and we notice this here. They get our vote, and we don't hear or see from them until they need another vote, or you got Hillary, somebody with a hot sauce or something, trying to pander for votes. Black people are waking up to that, and they are tired of that.
That's right.
Black people want economic opportunity. They want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be able to feed their families. They want to do all of that. Well, you can't do that outsourcing our jobs. You can't do that by allowing illegal immigrants to cross our borders and take those jobs, drive down the wages. Just imagine this here.
If you found yourself encountering a Democrat who also wanted to prevent outsourcing jobs, who had sort of the same policy when it comes to trade as Donald Trump does, Bernie Sanders, a Democrat,
no,
do you feel like you would?
Bernie Sanders was a socialist. I do not like socialize anything. I do not like all that globalism. I like what we have. I want Americans to be put first.
Right.
Okay, if we open up our borders to everybody, you know good and well that that's not going to work, because people have their own traditions and everybody is going to be bickering and fighting against them. You can't give everybody everything. Who going to pay for this here stuff?
That's
Well,
right.
listen, girls, ladies, you dodged the question about whether or not you voted for me in 2014 or not, but let you pass on that. Diamond and Silk, we could totally keep you on the air all day.
Yeah,
but
that would be fun.
we would have. Please come back and talk to us again. I know
will.
our regular co-host Carrie Sheffield is very disappointed that she wasn't able to be here to talk to you today. But thank you so much, and
Thank you,
please come
ladies.
back.
Thank
Thank you for having us.
They dodged it.
They are so
They dodged
fun.
it though. They
did
dodged it.
dodge
I kind of have I like to
they voted
believe that
for
they.
you.
I think they did.
voted
I
for
really
you.
do. It wasn't enough.
I would have voted for you.
Thank you. If
I was in North Carolina.
only I had enough conservatives who felt the same way. Oh goodness.
Oh gosh, so we have been hearing a lot about Robert Mueller and his investigation this week. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Here to discuss the latest updates is Ian Kullgren, a reporter at Politico. Welcome, Ian. I start my day off with Politico, by the way.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Politico Playbook.
I love hearing
Do you
that.
subscribe?
right.
Do you subscribe to the Politico Pro?
No, I just get
'Cause that
the-
ain't cheap,
Oh,
folks.
no.
That ain't cheap.
No.
It is not.
But Politico is sort of, it is the place that everyone goes in D.C. because you guys tend to have the inside track. What is the inside track right now on what's happening with this Mueller investigation? This breaking news yesterday that perhaps Donald Trump asked Don McGahn to fire Robert Mueller, and he said he would not. He would quit before he would do that. Does that really affect the investigation in any way? Is this just another one of the straws that will continue to pile on the camel's back and yet never break it?
Well, you make an interesting point that it may not affect the investigation directly, because Trump did not, in fact, fire Mueller after Don McGahn, said that he wouldn't do it. However, it's really the first sort of public break that Trump has had with Mueller. Trump is not very disciplined in a lot of ways, but one way that the White House and Trump have been disciplined over the past few months is not publicly criticizing Mueller. We really haven't seen that before. And now to know privately that he considered firing him, I think is a significant development in its own right.
So I think that we should definitely note that the president denied this report. He was asked about it in Davos.
Correct.
He did say it was fake news, according to him.
News, folks, fake news. I think
For me, I read this story last night and I thought everybody's getting worked up about an anonymous, I believe it's anonymous source place story. So everyone's getting worked up over the fact that the president wanted to fire Mueller, but didn't. It's not like we have breaking news today that he fired Mueller. He didn't fire Mueller. So, I don't know. It sort of seems to me like one of those things. I'm struggling with the significance of this.
Is it more significant, though, that if Robert Mueller is looking into charges potentially of obstruction of justice, that this is another example, perhaps, of the president attempting to obstruct justice? And does that matter?
So, but I don't think firing. Well, listen, I'm not a lawyer, and we'll get your take. I don't think that firing Mueller would not be obstruction of justice, right?
Well, it's raised some sticky legal questions that we
Sure.
saw during Watergate, obviously, where, when Nixon fired Archibald Cox, it wasn't clear who was really in charge of the investigation, and there was sort of a power struggle there. We're not at that point, obviously. Trump has not fired Mueller, but I think it's an interesting window into his thinking for the reasons that he was considering firing Mueller. One of them being that he had quit Trump's golf club in Sterling, Virginia a few years earlier, that he, on the sort of other side of the spectrum, that he worked for a law firm that represented Jared Kushner. And, there were a few other things like that Trump was trying to argue that he was compromised, including that he had interviewed to be FBI director after Trump had fired Comey. So it's an interesting window into all the ways that they're sort of trying to discredit the
Sure, but I would just say,
investigation.
listen, if we go back to the 90s during the Clinton administration, when he was being investigated by Ken Starr, if we had Twitter and all the stuff around here, you cannot tell me that there was no discussion in the White House between Clinton, like, can I fire Ken Starr? What can I mean, they went on a whole disinformation campaign as well against Ken Starr. And from just a total political operative perspective, not from a legal perspective, this is what political operatives do. They protected Clinton. They tried to discredit Ken Starr. This is what this team is rallying around their president. I mean, to me, it's like it would be malpractice if people in the White House for either party didn't try to protect their president from a political perspective.
That's possible. I think the other interesting thing and potentially more significant thing we're seeing with the investigation, honestly, is what's going on in Congress with Republicans and Nunes threatening to release this classified memo, because that really is, the Justice Department has said that would, I don't know about derail the investigation, but certainly hurt it and hurt its efforts, and that really shows how this is turning more and more into a partisan issue.
At the same time, in Congress, there are two bills under consideration, I suppose, that are bipartisan, that would protect the special counsel, that would remove the ability, not remove the ability of the president to fire the special counsel, but would give the special counsel protection to be able to go to federal courts and say, I shouldn't have been fired, I was fired without cause, reinstate me. Are those more important now? Now that we know this information, does this new information give those more weight and make them more urgent?
It might. I think we'll have to see how things unfold today and early next week. I think Congress has had a hard time passing any sort of significant legislation, and I think that would be seen probably as a partisan issue on behalf of the Democrats, but it's Tom Tillis, Republican from North Carolina, Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, who have co-sponsored these bills. So it is pretty bipartisan. How is Don McGahn's life looking for the next few weeks? I mean, the president,
He's the White House counsel.
He is the White House counsel. He's the person who. But I can't help but think to myself, Donald Trump lives and dies by the press and the media, at least in his own at home in his room. Before this story came out, no one knew that Don McGahn had stood up to the president. Now that it's public that he's stood up to the president and the president has backed down to him, do you think that puts him in a more perilous position, that the president doesn't want people to know that he backed down to someone?
It could. I mean, I think it depends how much he thinks he needs Don McGahn. He's got Ty Cobb, who has sort of, steered the White House response to this, into a more, I suppose, peaceful place, right? I mean, I think because of Ty Cobb, they're not really out there throwing bombs at the investigation in a way that they might be otherwise. I think it really depends. I mean, we saw some friction between Trump and Kelly, the past few weeks, a couple weeks. And there were reports that, there's some sort of succession plan in place for Kelly. I don't know that he immediately fires him. Trump, as much as his tagline is "You're fired from The Apprentice," I think we've seen that he really does not like firing people, and he personally does not like confrontation. So I think it could be a slow burn that ultimately, starts and results in him getting pushed out. But I think any immediate action will probably not happen, although I could be eating my words.
You know, I think the disservice to the American people in all of this, no matter what side you sit on this investigation, is that we've lost the real ability to look at what the Russians did in 2016. I mean, I know that Facebook, has talked about the fact that a lot of the anti-Hillary ads, after Trump won, turned into "Not My President" ads, from the Russian side of things, and I don't feel like there's a lot of public discussion about what the American government is doing to protect the elections this year in 2018 from Russian interference. So everybody's taking their corner, defending the president, going after the president, and I'd like to see some bipartisan measures in Congress to say, how are we protecting the election this year? How are we preventing whatever happened in 2016, which was simply to sow chaos? That's what the Russians do. I really don't believe that they had a horse to pick. I think that they wanted to sow chaos.
I think that we have seen some bipartisan effort to focus the attention on that. And Richard Burr, Republican, on my ballot. I'm not a huge fan of most Republicans politically.
But you love me.
I do like Richard Burr, and I respect the fact that he is one Republican who has said, listen, we need to focus on this. But how much are those efforts hindered by the fact that the president still doesn't seem to want to acknowledge that the Russians did interfere in any way?
Right. I think anything with the word Russia attached to it is going to be dragged into the partisan freak show.
Which is unfortunate.
I think that's the point we're at.
Because then they win, right? Then they win because they get us fighting with each other instead of looking at the fact that they're trying to sow chaos, and they have sowed chaos into our electoral system.
We're pretty good at sowing chaos ourselves, to be honest with you.
We don't need them to pile on.
Ian, thank you so much for being with us today.
Great, Ian
Kullgren.
Thanks.
Come back. I have a feeling we'll still be talking about the Mueller investigation in Russia.
I do too.
It tells me it's not going away this week. So please come back and
I will.
help us sort through all of that mess when you can. Ian Kullgren, thank you.
Well,
so
thanks,
much.
guys.
Thank you.
We talk about that every week. Every week.
I think that you and I might solve the world's problems.
We
by
could
the end of the
listen.
show.
I feel like if they would
America, just tune in to Morgan and Clay.
we could
All will be
totally
better.
handle so much. But I will say, I think that a lot of it has to do with, I agree with you, and I think a lot of Republicans do agree that we need to address, because the truth is we don't know who they will like next time. If they did have a horse in the race, there's no way to know that next time it won't be the Democrats. So Republicans, I think, recognize that. But I believe it becomes somewhat more tenuous for them to be able to say, we need to address this when the leader of the party isn't yet willing to admit that there's
And
an
you
issue.
know how I feel about foreign policy stuff, Clay. I think that our last president had 8 years to deal with this, and he did, on every measure in my mind, he did everything to actually embolden Russia, and that's why they have the power they do today.
Well,
You're not going to agree
there you
with
go.
me.
I don't always agree with you, that's for sure. We're going to move on to our Change.org segment. Change.org, the world's largest petition platform, and it's a hub for civic organizing. So we want to invite our good friend Alexandra DeSanctis is back with us. Thank you very much. And Nicole Goodkind from Newsweek is with us as well. And we're talking about an issue that is very near and dear to my heart, and something that I am rabidly and intensely focused on. And I'm really happy that finally the press seems to be focused on it more, gerrymandering. And there's a renewed focus in the media on gerrymandering, because right now we're seeing cases in my home state of North Carolina, Wisconsin, Maryland, and now this week, Pennsylvania, where the state Supreme Court in Pennsylvania struck down the federal congressional lines in Pennsylvania, saying that they were
Florida.
gerrymandered.
Yep.
Is it happening in Florida now?
It has, my home state, right?
Okay, so it's kind of everywhere. Gerrymandering is one of those things that people recognize, if they recognize happens. It's been specifically struck down by the Supreme Court that you cannot racially gerrymander lines and divide people up specifically by race. Politically gerrymandering is not constitutionally acceptable, but the justices on the Supreme Court have had a really hard time, federal judges have had a really hard time defining what that is. Why all of a sudden, Alexandra, we'll start with you, why all of a sudden are they saying, okay, we found out, now it's an issue, now we got to focus on it?
Well, my understanding is that with this Wisconsin case in particular, which was heard before the Supreme Court in the fall, it went to the Supreme Court specifically because a couple of researchers came up with this criteria called the efficiency gap, and they think that this is going to be sort of the mystical formula that will allow the Supreme Court to finally issue a ruling on what partisan gerrymandering is and how it's unacceptable. Because in the past, they've sort of left the door open to do that, but they haven't really, there's no kind of way to come up with a criteria to say exactly what it looks like and what you can't do. So this efficiency gap supposedly is this sort of formula where you calculate the percentage of votes that a party gets in a state, an overall state, and then if the gap is bigger for one party than the other, they're judged to have an advantage. And so the theory, I guess,
came up with this formula?
it's two researchers. I forget their names.
And it's complicated, admittedly, and actually
is.
it went
Yeah.
to the Supreme Court. Justice John Roberts, Chief Justice, excuse me, John Roberts called it sociological gobbledygook, I think, because it's very difficult. I think their issue had been it's very difficult for them to be able to define it. It's one thing for them to say it's against the law, but they need to be able to quantify it in a way that lower courts are able to say, okay, we're going to put it through this formula, and this is racially gerrymandered. Do you think they've met that standard? Do you feel like the Supreme Court has found that to be something that they can measure and quantify, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot like, as you know, Justice Stewart said, I know it when I see it. And there is this, I mean,
Same thing.
when you look at what happened with the state courts in Pennsylvania, they didn't use this measure, right? They actually had a set of criteria that was more about I know and I see it. And when you look at the statistics and you see that, you know, in North Carolina, about 50% of the state voted Democrat, and yet, you know, 10 out of 13 seats are Republican, you see there's a problem when you look at North Carolina and you have the state, you know, legislators saying, we're doing this. Like, they will blatantly say it. We are doing this along partisan lines. Someone said, why are 10 out of 13 seats, you know,
Right. In North
Going to-
Carolina, they actually, the person who drew them actually did say, we're drawing this way
know,
because
but-
I think Republicans are better to be elected than Democrats.
and they said, sorry, when they said why 10 out of 13 seats, they said, well, because we couldn't really figure it out to make it 11 or 12. That's literally what they said.
Right. But you ran for Congress in North Carolina. Do you think that, you said this issue is near and dear to your heart. Do you think that this affected your race, the gerrymandering issue?
Well, I know it did, and I ran in large part not because I ran to put a spotlight on gerrymandering. The reason that my district was unwinnable for a Democrat is because it had been gerrymandered to protect that Republican incumbent.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we see so much hyperpartisanship, why we see so much polarization.
because there are plenty for Democrat, districts that are drawn
Look
for
at
Democrat.
Chicago.
Not in my
come
state.
on.
There are two states. There are two states. It's
And that's-
Illinois
and
and
that's-
Maryland, but the vast majority of the states
But
are
that's also why I think I'll finish answering your question, but then go to that because there are districts like the 2nd in North Carolina at the time in 2014 that were drawn so strongly to be for a Republican that it really didn't matter who you ran against in the general. The Republican was going to win. So what happens then is the people who decide that district's representative are the rabid farther right or farther left voters who are voting in the primary. But what's interesting, though, now is that the Supreme Court heard the Wisconsin case. It was a case where the Republicans had overreached. And at the same time, they've decided to pick up a Maryland case. And the Maryland case is an example, there are less of them, an example where Democrats are believed to have overreached and gerrymandered in their favor. They haven't heard that one yet. Do you think that that's going to change the way certain justices on the Supreme Court look at it?
Maybe, but I think honestly it comes down to this efficiency gap because the question is, can we quantify what partisan gerrymandering looks like? And to me, I don't think that this standard is helpful because it looks at the entire state. Voters don't vote based on what's going to happen in the entire state. Candidates don't run based on what's going to happen in the entire state. Parties don't make their decisions on who they're going to support based on statewide results.
But
so I don't think it's really indicative of gerrymandering.
But part of this, and I know I'm that told you, girl, this is my topic. Right? So, but one of the other efficiency gap is one way to quantify to look at it.
Right.
Justice Breyer said gave some more general criteria. Was this districting plan drawn with only one party input? Looking at other things, and then one of the things that I think breaks it down the most. Succinctly and maybe the most convincingly is this, not the efficiency gap, but this idea that if equality of party success. So if the Republican Party wins 50% of the vote and gets 75% of the seats, that's fine, as long as if the Democratic Party wins 50% of the vote, they also get 75% of the seats, or so on and so
But
on.
what if the state just happens to be more Republican or have more Republican congressional
Well,
districts?
then, in that case, it's not about who wins. It's about the likelihood of your ability to have that same sort of electoral success. In North Carolina, Republicans only have to get in the state legislature something about 45% of the vote in order to get 70% of the legislature. Math, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, has shown that in order for the Democrats to get 70% of the legislature, the General Assembly, they would have to get almost 80% of the vote. You know, they've drawn it that way.
I guess my question is, what if that has to do with where people live naturally and not based on how
And I think it's fair that, you know, we vote with our feet, and Democrats do tend to live in more urban areas.
Right, that's what I'm
That is
wondering.
true. But when you look at where the lines were pre-2010 and where they are now, you can see that there's obvious gerrymandering to benefit Republicans.
Alexandra, oh, go ahead. No, I talked the whole time.
No, what I'm wondering about, you know, I have a lot of friends. I'm going to a party next Friday, a friend who is involved in a third party. And I know a lot of people, especially millennials, probably people who are watching this show, who don't feel like they identify with either party. So I don't know this. You two are the gerrymandering experts. But is there a way in all of these cases that are going through the Supreme Courts and these new formulas, do you foresee a third party having the ability to rise up if gerrymandering is dealt with? Do you understand my question? I don't know if there's a correlation here, but...
Yeah, one of the main arguments against gerrymandering is that it really hurts moderates because we go to these extremes, and it makes it harder for third parties to rise up. Now, if you look at California, they actually took away the right to redistrict from their state legislature and gave it to an independent council. And because of that, we've seen a lot of younger candidates who, you know, have alternative viewpoints rise up. So there is a way to move beyond this.
And that's one of the petitions that's on change.org. We should probably talk about those
Yes.
since we're talking about change.org. There are a lot of petitions there that are suggesting that are petitioning for states to use independent commissions instead. And there are some states where there is a constitutional process by which you can get enough signatures, you can get an election you can get a referendum on the state ballot. A lot of states don't have that, but those who do have that have found some success in getting independent commissions. Would that satisfy you, since we're looking for ways to agree? Would something like that satisfy you? I think it would satisfy Stephen Breyer.
Sure. I mean, I'm not a fan of partisan gerrymandering either. I just don't like the narrative that it's always the GOP pushing this agenda. A lot of times it's just where people live, and a lot of times it is Democrats redrawing districts to their advantage as well.
And I agree with you. I think that, you know, when you look at it, if Democrats had won in 2010, they probably would also be gerrymandering. It's a completely, you know, bipartisan issue.
And from North Carolina, I can tell you, when Democrats held the General Assembly in North Carolina for 150 years, they drew them a little bit more towards the Democratic favor. I think the difference this time, and maybe perhaps in my opinion why a lot more of these are coming to the courts now, is that while Democrats in North Carolina did gerrymander it, at the time we had 7 Democrats in office in our 13 and 6 Republicans. So they did gerrymander it, but there was a little bit more nuance to it. Whereas when Republicans, when Republicans came back, or they didn't have the they didn't have the computerized models either.
Right.
But when Republicans came into office in 2010 off that big Republican sweep, in states like Wisconsin and states like North Carolina, the argument is that they overreached. And so I do wonder, you know, had they just gerrymandered it a little bit to kind of give themselves certainly an edge, but not like David Lewis said, well, we did it this way because we've
done it forever.
They said we did it in North Carolina for 10 because we couldn't figure out a way to do it for 11. And I kind of wondered to myself, you know, if they had just done it for 8 or 9 instead of the 10, they would have had less.
And it's because there's been no repercussion, right? So they're getting a little too ambitious, but it's also because we have this new technology that now allows you to gerrymander through alleyways and non-exact streets, and it's just a lot easier than it used to be.
Alexandra, you want to say something before you have to go?
No, I was just going to say the Supreme Court, I think to me, I don't know, this isn't necessarily something we need the Supreme Court to weigh in on. That's my biggest concern, is that they might latch on to this kind of crazy research and then issue some unilateral ruling that's overreaching.
Okay, well, we disagree there. But if you feel like nonpartisan commissions are a good idea, I think they are, and I think a lot of people, even Alexandra and I
can get on board with that.
71% of Americans.
71%. Then check out some of these petitions on change.org and find one for your state where people may be trying to bring more attention to gerrymandering. So thank you so much to both Nicole and Alexandra for being with us.
Thank you.
You know, I could just.
I feel like you could have taken the whole hour on that.
I totally
like
would have. We'll let you introduce our next guest because while that was totally something I was into, you know our next guest.
I am very, very excited for our next guest, Representative Congressman Will Hurd. He's a congressman from Texas' 23rd District. He recently helped introduce a bipartisan bill that protects DACA recipients as well as increases border security. We're going to welcome him on Skype, and let me just say to you, Clay, that I think Will Hurd is the I hate to say, I was going to say he's the future of the Republican Party, but he is everything that I want the Republican Party to be.
I was going to say, what is the future? What is the future of the Republican Party? Which direction will it go? Maybe he'll know. Congressman, if you're there with us.
Hey guys, how are y'all?
Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I was a supporter of Wells from day one when he first ran for Congress. So I think it's safe to say, Congressman, that you owe your political career to me.
There we go.
She just
Breaking
told me
news.
she would have voted for me when I ran for Congress, so I may owe mine to her too, if I ever did. Tell us just your district is San Antonio and parts west, east, north. Where? Tell us where the 23rd is.
So the district goes from San Antonio, El Paso. It's 29 counties, 2 time zones, 820 miles of the border. It takes 10 hours to drive across the district from one corner to the other at 80 miles an hour, which is actually the speed limit in most of the district.
Is that gerrymandered? You have a lot of the border, then you're saying. You mean you have so immigration is certainly a big issue for your constituents. It's something that people are very interested in. Is that right?
Absolutely. Immigration, border security. I have more border than any other member of Congress. Also, I spent almost a decade as an undercover officer in the CIA. And so I've chased bad guys all across the world. So making sure that we actually gain operational control of our border is something that's important in my district because it's a public safety issue to folks that actually live along the border.
So you have introduced legislation on immigration. The White House had a new plan out yesterday proposing, I'm just going to look at the specifics here, 1.8 million young undocumented immigrants these are the DACA kids, that would have a pathway to citizenship. In exchange, here's the deal, they want $25 billion for the wall or other strict immigration cuts. So how do you feel about the White House's, about the new bill proposal that they just put out? How does it differ from what you and your colleagues are putting out? And do you think that we might actually be able to come to something here that would prevent a shutdown?
Well, I hope we do something that prevents a shutdown. And I've always been on the camp, and this is what Pete Aguilar and I have been saying is, Congress over the years has done comprehensive and partisan pretty poorly. So let's try something different. Let's try something narrow and bipartisan. And that's what the USA Act, what Pete Aguilar and I have introduced. And we had 50 original co-sponsors, 25 Republicans, 25 Democrats on this legislation. And it really is a border security fix plus a fix for DACA or Dreamers. And so a lot of us, when you say DACA, that really actually refers to about 700,000 young men and women. Dreamers is about 1.2. And what's interesting about the president's proposal is he's ultimately going to provide a permanent legislative fix for about 1.8 million kids. So it goes a long way, and I think people are excited about that piece. And I think that shows where the Republican Party needs to be focused on.
There's
now some of the other go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There's still conflict within the Republican Party though, because yesterday this plan came out from the White House, this proposal, and it I guess expectedly got some heat from the left, and from
the right.
But that's my point. Also from the right, there are some in your Republican caucus, perhaps in other caucuses as well that you're not in, but who are not satisfied with the fact that Democrats initially had been asking for about 900,000 Dreamers to be protected, and the president doubled that offer in exchange for. So I think that's important to note that he did double the number of DACA protections, and that's kind of upset quite a few people on the farther right of the party. Is that something that those folks will ever get on board with in the Republican Party?
Well, upset, you're being very diplomatic, Clay. The answer is there is no such thing as a 218 Republican solution to immigration. It doesn't exist. And so the reality is going to be the only way this gets done is if we do it in a bipartisan way. And I do believe that there is a solution where you can get 120, 110 Republicans and Democrats that ultimately pass something in the House. So we're never going to get everybody on board with this. There's a reason that this topic has been debated for 17 17 years. I think what the president put out is an initial negotiation, and I think this refines the areas we should be focusing on for an ultimate solution. But I also believe that the president said a couple of weeks ago, whatever we put on his desk, he's likely to sign. If you can get something out of the Senate and the House and get it to the president's desk, he's likely to go to sign this. And so, again, we believe.
Tell that to Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham.
So I've got one. I know that you have to get going, Congressman, but I have one thing for you that is, Clay cares about gerrymandering. As somebody who's in the Navy Reserve, so I'm, active reservist. These continuing resolutions, these shutdowns, the lack of having a budget is just it hampers the military so much. I mean, we cannot plan. We cannot be the strongest military Navy in the world if we have to continue to operate on these continuing resolutions, and if we have to worry about having a shutdown every 3 weeks. Just can't operate this way. I know that you served overseas as well as I have. So can you talk to me, is there any hope for the sake of me and everybody else in the military that we can actually have a fully funded budget and not have to operate, not knowing whether the government's going to be open on Monday or not?
Well, so first off, I think this is a question to ask our friends on the Senate Democrats, because the House has passed appropriations bills. This is something that hasn't happened, I think, for almost like a decade, and they've been sitting over in the Senate. But I do believe at this next February 8th, whether or not we can have all the appropriations bills written in time to not have to do another month. But the agreement is there on, I think, the cap, the top line numbers of what we're going to do for the military and the rest of the government. But you're absolutely right. You cannot run the world's largest company month to month. That's why I think we should be going to a 2-year budgeting cycle. I think we should be going to 2 years appropriations in order to make sure the men and women in our military are able to plan appropriately.
Well, I totally agree. I know that we have to let you go, which I could talk to you for another 10 minutes. But thank you so much, Congressman Will Hurd, my friend.
Come back and see us again.
Future of the Republican Party right there, friends.
Thanks, Morgan. Thanks, Clay. Y'all have a great weekend.
Thanks.
I mean, he's right. The government, the Congress has not done comprehensive very well, and that's because there's so many tentacles. But I looked at the president's. I spoke to one of our mutual friends, a strong conservative woman, yesterday when this proposal came out from the White House, and I said, on its face, it looks to be somewhat acceptable. I mean, I have to dig into it a little bit more. There's certainly, you've got the wall issue, and I'm sort of one of those people who thinks, Democrats who thinks the wall is just a stupid waste of money.
Although they all voted for it.
But at the end of the day, I think the reason they did was because at the end of the day, just give him his fucking wall. It's not going to do anything. I mean, it's not going to change anything. It's just a symbol of what it's a waste of money. But at that point, Republicans don't get to say we're the party of smart spending and lower spending. But they're. But 100, in exchange for protecting twice the number of dreamers that the Democratic Party wanted.
It was a great, the bill was, I agree with you, the proposal that the White House put out yesterday when I started reading it last night, and I'm no immigration expert, but I was pleasantly surprised. And
I'm on the left and was too.
And I thought, okay, this should be something that Congress should be able to come to. This is a good starting point. It's a good negotiating
There's certainly people on the right who are very upset by this larger number of undocumented immigrants who would be protected and be given a path to citizenship. And then there are folks on the left who are upset about the changes to the immigration system, where you would not be able to sponsor certain family members that you have been able to, but still be able to sponsor your children.
So you wouldn't be able to you wouldn't be able to sponsor your aunt and your uncle, but you could bring in your parents.
You could not bring in your parents.
No,
it's right now. It's just your spouse and your minor children, which could use some tweaking. But I also say, God, I'm going to get in so much trouble as a Democrat for this. But when you choose to immigrate to the country, you make a choice to come, and you have to make that choice knowing that it's perhaps not going to be possible for you to sponsor your second cousin to come in with you.
I agree with that.
And it's a choice to come. Now, for those folks who are here as refugees, I think it's a completely different thing.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Completely different thing, and we cannot put them. We got to stop. We could just go on about this forever, but we've got another very special guest here, Kathrine Herzer, who is one of the stars of Madam Secretary on CBS.
I love your show.
Oh,
I love it. Yes.
Thank you guys for having me.
TiVo's it, so we don't miss it.
Well, let's take a look at it right now. See if there are no spoilers, hopefully, for Morgan.
Do not need to overlove it. You can just like it. I'm secure in my choice.
All right, well, I'm gonna go to the dessert bar, which looks totally ordinary, by the way.
Can I get an ordinary brownie?
Maybe give it a second. There's some staring going on.
Sweetheart, we don't worry.
Mom, there's normal staring and then there's creepy staring. This feels like creepy staring.
It does?
Kinda.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that was really cute. So, what is it like being on a political TV show like Madam Secretary, especially during this moment in time in American politics?
Yeah.
What an adventure for you.
It really is. It's been such an amazing learning experience. And I mean, everyone, not only are we a political show that's sort of really current with everything that's going on, but we also have a cast and a crew that just is so involved.
Yeah.
I mean,
Tay Leone is her grandmother actually started U.S. Fund for UNICEF.
She did.
She is now,
I'm very involved in UNICEF.
Tay is on the board of UNICEF, and so she's very socially active. How much does that play into, and she's also a producer on the show, how much does that play into the topics that you talk about, and how much do they actually specifically try to tie what's happening in the public right now in our government into the storylines?
It's really crucial for us. I mean, that first episode that we just took a clip from, that whole episode was inspired by sort of the fake news crisis that's going on today. How do we understand what's truthfully going on in our government versus something that's an illusion that the media has created? And it's really hard. What I love most about our show is that it sort of gives people a way to learn how the government works in not such a satirical way that a lot of other shows look at it. We're not...
Not like Veep, although I think that's pretty damn accurate.
It is
probably.
right.
A lot of incompetent people going.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't sort of have that bleak look on incompetence or like the sort of very aggressive, spiteful nature of House of Cards. Yeah, exactly.
That got to be a bit much.
Yeah, I stopped watching after season 3. I was a big fan, though, at one point.
I ask you, and I'm sure you must be getting this in all of your interviews, about the Me Too movement, right? Because you're a woman, you're in Hollywood, although I think women of every industry, women in politics and finance, I think this is all something we discuss. I had a bipartisan dinner party last night.
What?
In D.C., yes, where I was getting people together, and we were sort of talking about our experiences, in D.C., and we were also talking about when is the right time to speak up. Do you speak up if you hear something? It's not really your story then, but I'm just curious if you think, I think we all think this is positive, the Hollywood Me Too movement. Do you think that things are actually going to change, or is it going to be like rah rah, girl power, and then everything goes back to normal?
I mean, I don't think that we could possibly go back to normal. There's too many women that have shared their stories that really, I mean, they stick with you forever. Seeing those speeches at the Women's March that just happened, I don't know, like I think about them almost every day still. They linger with you so much that it's hard to accept it. I mean, I hear things, you hear people so aware of it and they're sort of like getting ready to not to change. It feels like something's changed. I'm really lucky that I've never really had anything too serious happen to me in the industry, and I'm young, but I mean, we still deal with the pressures of the way we look and how we're judged. So it's a really, really big part of the industry, and being a young woman, it's hard. But I also think that it's a bigger problem in the world today. I mean, with social media and everything that's happening to young people, it's really hard to sort of not be really
social media
insecure.
has really
Yeah.
kind of brought a lot of those issues like that
Absolutely.
that had been ignored for a while to the forefront. Another
Absolutely.
one that has, I think, been ignored a lot, mental health issues.
Right.
We haven't talked about too much until the past few years. You're doing an episode on mental health issues, and you kind of have a passion for talking about the importance of keeping that message on the forefront.
I mean, for me, it's the most important thing we could be discussing. I mean, teenagers with depression and anxiety is at a rate that we've never seen before, and there's a reason for that. I mean, we all feel it. I mean, the constant need to post or to see what other people are doing, it's really hard. And I'm a part of the Creative Coalition, which actually Tim Daly, who plays my father on the show, is the president of. And they sort of make sure that schools get funding for the arts, which I think is absolutely the best way to combat it. I mean, I know that being a creative artist helps me in so many different aspects of my life, and being able to
really have the space to sort of be myself and to figure out what I care about and what I'm passionate
So
about.
what exactly is the show going to focus on as it relates to mental health? What do we have to look forward to?
I can't give you too much because I don't want to give spoilers, but it's a really exciting episode that's coming up. And
Always trying to get special. Can't do that, Morgan.
You don't happen to know spoilers for Game of Thrones, do you?
They all
my
die
God.
at the end.
I did an interview once where they spoiled Game of Thrones for me.
No.
Oh my God, that's
Oh wait,
so funny
but
that you
I
said
do.
that.
I scroll through the internet looking for Game of Thrones spoilers
Why?
because I
wrong
have
with
to
you?
know.
Because you get too nervous. You get too nervous
I
watching
have
it.
to know
and you
what's
don't wanna-
going on. I have to know.
Well, I don't watch it at all. I don't watch it at all. No, I don't. I'm not a
weird.
Game of Thrones person. Political dramas are far more
Game of
interesting
Thrones
to me.
is a political drama.
Yeah, but they got dragons. I don't deal with that kind of stuff at all. We can find Madam Secretary comes on CBS on Sundays at
10.
10 p.m.
Yes,
Been
10
moved- you
p.m.
moved back an hour?
We did. Yeah, we started at 8, 9, 10, but we're holding our spot. So
Sunday's a big night for TV too. They put most of the networks put their most powerful stuff on
Yeah.
Sunday nights, which makes it tough for all the rest of us. But that's a good sign. That
I
people
like
are
watching
doing,
it on Sunday night.
It's a good sign that
too.
people are liking
It's a good way to start your week. Get a little tidbit of what's going on in the world.
and get depressed by Game of Thrones or whatever dragons. Well,
No, Madam Secretary will leave you
Will leave you feeling better
good.
about it.
And you can watch it with the whole family, which is nice.
Well, Sundays at 10. Thank you so much, Kathrine Herzer.
It's so nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you
joining
guys
us.
too.
Great show. Really great show.
You watched
Okay.
Game of Thrones is a.
It's a political thriller.
You know what? I tried it. One of my very good
love
friends.
it.
One of my very
Love
good
it.
friends is on it. She
Really?
well, she was.
Ooh, you have to
she
tell
was. She
me.
was. She was the shame nun. And so she did spam a lot. She did spam a lot with me many years ago.
fun.
And I thought when I found out she was going to go on, I said, okay, well now I've got to.
It's so good.
I've got to learn to watch it.
So
got
good.
through. I couldn't get through the first episode. I was like, this isn't going to happen in real life.
No, I mean, I agree with you at first, like the White Walkers, the first episode, I thought this is, but you have to keep going through, and then it really is a political thriller. And he does a good job, I think, with making strong female characters. I love it. I'm a
I like
freak.
things that
I'm a Game
happen.
of
I
Thrones-
like things that happen that could happen or based on true story. If it's based on a true story, I'd watch a dog stare at a wall for 2 hours.
I like
I love
doggies.
that. And I'm the same with the stuff that I read. I can't read fiction that is fantasy. I haven't done the Harry Potter. I like reading biographies. I like reading.
Well, you're not invited to
historical
my Game
fiction.
of Thrones party.
Fun. I like reading memoirs. Segue.
Yes. So we are excited. Lastly, we are going to bring on today's Bookster segment. We have author and political columnist Duvalier. Did I pronounce?
Duvalier.
Okay. close
Duvalier.
enough.
Ding, 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 ding.
You were
That's what
right.
I said it was going to be. They
You
put it
were
wrong
right.
in the teleprompter.
I'm from the South, so
Duvalier, Malone, who's with us, he's got a new book. It was all a dream. It's coming out it's not out yet. It's coming out very soon.
not out yet.
But it's a memoir. It's a memoir that you wrote about your own life and overcoming tragedy. Give us an idea of what you felt you wanted to tell people through your tragedies.
I tell you what, I started working on this book in 2012, and in 2012 it was merely just a dream. It was just me writing down what I went through as a child as a way of therapy for me. And I quickly figured out as I would use part of the book to go and do speaking engagements across the South when I lived in Mississippi, young students would ask me, do you have a book? And I was like, no, I don't have a book. And quickly I began to realize, okay, I need to start forming this into a book. And so now 2018, here we are, and it's going to talk about how I grew up in poverty. My father had mental illness. My parents went through a really hard divorce that led us into poverty, that some days I would go to school and not realize how I would have food at home when I would come back home. And so the teachers thought I should be put in special ed because I couldn't focus in school. And the reason why I couldn't focus was because of I was hungry. And so definitely I'm excited to be able to tell my story, how I was able to rise above that.
How did you rise above it? Tell us what you did?
I tell you what, I am also a man of faith. And so definitely I was raised by my grandmother and always believe in putting God first. And in saying that, I had an opportunity at the age of 16 to travel to the nation's capital of Washington, D.C., where I was able to meet people from all over the country, just a little country boy who had never got on a plane before. And that gave me an illuminating moment to wake up and understand that my situation of poverty doesn't define who I am. And so from there, I was able to motivate myself to do better because when I went to that trip at 16, I was just settling for average in school. And so came back from that trip, applied, went to college, and from there, now I call the nation's capital my home there in Washington, D.C. And it was just a dream at 16.
I imagine your story's not completely uncommon, especially in the South where poverty rates are higher, North Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana.
Absolutely.
What do you say to those kids or teenagers, or what do you think they can learn from your book? To those who don't, those kids and teenagers who might not have the opportunity to go to DC, who might not have that eye-opening experience, what should they be looking for? What can they look towards in their life to give them the same kind of hope you had?
To know that it is something great on the inside of all of us, and we all have a book on the inside of us. We all have a story, and it's up to us to determine how we're going to tell our stories. And so for those young people that are in poverty and those young people that are struggling, I would say, for me, I settled for average because I let my situation define me until I had that illuminating moment. For you, your situation does not define you, that you are greater than that situation, and that you can do whatever you put your mind to do to stay focused and to know that what's on the inside of you is greater than your situation, because I believe every single individual on this earth have greatness on the inside of them.
So writing a book is incredibly challenging. I mean, I have probably for 3 years now been trying to sit down and write a book, but then I get distracted and busy with work. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to get it. You're inspiring me today, by the way. I'm going to take a crack. My husband's working on writing a book right now. So what advice can you give me and Clay and the rest of us who are, want to be authors? How can you inspire us?
Let me tell you this. In telling your story, like I said, I've been working on this since 2012, right? So of course, you get off track, you get focused. And I got very frustrated because I was like, my book is not coming out as fast as I wanted it to come out. But I'll tell you what, as I said earlier, we all are telling our stories, right? And so for me, I am a changed individual based on what I would have told people and what I would have told students in the world in 2012. So I would say, don't get discouraged, stay focused, but understand that the story is being developed every day that we wake up and we live our lives. Our stories are being developed. So
it's nice to hear that you started writing in 2012.
In 2012.
There's hope for you, yes.
Yes. So this has been a long process for me, but I'm extremely excited to release this to the world this spring. So
spring, and where will we? This is our Bookster segment, so you can certainly find it on Bookster, and people will be able to find it when?
April 7th. So April 7th, that is my birthday. That is my birthday. Nice. And so it's April 7th. Everybody here has been asking me, so are you going to be able to tell us the title? And the title is very dramatic. Okay. It's different. And so I haven't released the title to everyone yet.
Titles are important.
So it is.
I'll pick up a book and judge it by the cover.
So when I release the title, I want to come back come back and talk to you guys about the title and how that title came into play.
There now we got some suspense, just like your Game of Thrones cliffhanger. Duvalier, Malone, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll see you next time.
Very inspiring.
We'll see you when the book comes out. Thank you very much.
I noticed something today.
What'd you notice?
In the hour that I spent with you, my Southern accent has gotten stronger
You're welcome.
the hour.
That happens.
It's like coming back.
Did you make an effort to get rid of it?
I think I did, and when I was in college, I was doing beauty pageants in Florida, the Miss America pageant, and I think as I was working on the interview, I do think, because when I was a kid, I talk like videos. I talk like you.
See, now what's crazy to me is that I don't hear it. I never think I have an accent. I know. Listen,
I love it.
I know I have an accent. I've been told enough times to understand that I do, but I never actually think that I do, and I've been talked to by people to do this part or that part in a either play, musical, something like that. And I've always told them, listen, as long as it's not a Midwestern accent, then, because I can't do that because I think I sound like you. I hear myself and I think, I sound just like her. I don't sound like British people, so I can imitate them.
Yeah.
But I think I sound like you. I don't hear it.
I kind of wish I didn't get rid of by now.
I had
like a bucket of sweet tea and every Friday with Clay.
There you go. Listen, I'll bring the sweet tea. Don't you worry about it. I was told by so many people after Idol. This is, by the way, before I knew I had an accent. Because my family all talks like this. And so the fact that I didn't talk like this meant that I must not have it. I was from the big city of Raleigh,
I like Raleigh.
And Andy Griffith's show is what made me think I didn't have one. Because I watch Andy Griffith now, and every time they go to Raleigh, They leave Mayberry to go to Raleigh. All the people in Raleigh are wearing these fur coats and these pearl necklaces, and they all speak like this. So I figured, well, I must talk like that too. I had no idea. Now I realize.
I like that you got your education through
The Andy Griffith
Through the
Show.
Andy Griffith.
Absolutely. Still watch it to this day. Now, that's something to watch more than Game of Thrones to me. Absolutely.
Slightly better than Game of Thrones. I'll give
Well,
you
come
that,
back,
slightly.
please, and do this again next
This
time.
is
I mean,
fun.
we miss
Thank
Carrie.
you.
We miss Carrie being
miss you,
here. But
Carrie.
when if she ever has to be out again, please come back and do
I'm
this
not a
again.
bad replacement.
You're not bad at all.
I'm not bad.
I'm impressed, by the way, that your shirt wasn't see-through. You wore green today. I don't know what they did in the control room, but that
I was trying to impress you.
that was it should be a floating
I
head.
know. Sorry. Yeah, I forgot I'm not supposed to wear green.
If you loved Morgan as much as I do, you can catch her on Tuesday mornings at 9 on Bold Business. And I'll be back here next week at 10 o'clock with Carrie Sheffield. Thank you, guys. Thank you again. Thank you so much for joining us. See you then.
Thank you.